Our ancient word reading this morning is from 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 4 to 11. Now there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are varieties of services, but the same Lord. And there are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who activates all of them in everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. To one is given through the Spirit the utterance of wisdom, and to another the utterance of knowledge according to the same Spirit. To another faith by the same Spirit. To another gifts of healing by the one Spirit. To another the working of powerful deeds. To another prophecy. To another the discernment of spirits. To another various kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. All these are activated by one and the same Spirit, who allots to each one individually, just as the Spirit chooses. Our contemporary word is Deaconing Group Discernment by Susan Beaumont. The truths of God are revealed and tested within community. We are meant for life in community. We are one body to function properly. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. To one is given the gift of utterance of wisdom, and to another the utterance of knowledge according to the same Spirit. Left on our own, we are prone to misinterpret the spirits according to our personal will and liking. The community helps us to test our discernment because the community manifests collective wisdom.
I like that idea of collective wisdom, and I always hope that what is given to me to say reflects some of our collective wisdom, as well as the wisdom of others not within our local community that we study. So our invitation to transformation this morning is an invitation to wonder. An invitation to wonder, how is this new life manifesting itself among us? I want to just tell a little personal story to start. Back in 1968, I was in high school, and one of the great sad events of our lifetimes took place when Martin Luther King was assassinated. Martin Luther King Jr. And there was a march in our town that ended with a service, which was at the local church where I was a member. And I regret to say that I was not part of the march. I was not encouraged to be part of the march, but our youth group was encouraged to attend the service, which was a revelation for me of a kind of energy that I hadn't known before. And it just so happened also that evening I was sitting in the balcony with my friends, and I never sat in the balcony. I didn't really have a sense of what it was to sit in the balcony, as opposed to down on the main floor of the sanctuary. And I realized that when we change where we sit, we see something different. And that metaphor of the balcony is one that has hung with me for a long time. And I think it fits with both our Corinthians passage and with our passage from Susan Beaumont. Now, in Corinthians, for those of us who haven't been studying the Bible lately, just a little introduction. This is a letter that comes in the New Testament, one of many letters written by the Apostle Paul, who was one of the main recorders of what we know about that early time in the church. And he, with colleagues, was traveling around the Eastern Mediterranean, establishing local ecclesia, local communities of Christ worshipers. And he would stay there for 6 months or a year, and then he would move on to the next one. But he would write letters back to the people he had known, and they would write to him. They were often writing about challenges in their communities. And we have a tendency to read these letters as if they were written to us. When we read between the lines, we can see that they were written responding to particular challenges in particular places. So when we read them, we look for what parts of it are speaking to us today, and recognizing that some parts we can set aside. And I won't go into details there, but any of you who've read about Women Keep Silent in the Churches, you know what I'm talking about. Now, we only have a few documents from this early time in the church, and what we do have shows us some of the beginnings of what is a very diverse Christian tradition, and shows us that our tradition was diverse from the beginning. So we shouldn't be surprised that we have different churches, different varieties of churches in different places. The teachings of Paul for us are examples and not necessarily prescriptions. Now, in our passage today, he was talking about how each one of us has different gifts. And he named many kinds of gifts, and I'm quite sure that this is not a complete list of the gifts that manifest themselves in our communities. It doesn't name anything about cooking, for example, and as we know, food is a very important part of being a community. So I know there are many things left out. But it reminds us that for each of us who becomes part of this community, whether for a day or a month or a year or a lifetime, each one of us finds gifts in ourselves, some of which we may not have recognized before. And part of our work as a community is to help each other find those gifts, to notice them, to encourage each other, to support each other, to cultivate those gifts for each other and for the whole community. We never quite know how our shared activities will draw us out, the gifts that might be revealed, and indeed something that might not even be a gift but a skill that we just have to develop. Last week we talked about liminal seasons. These are times when something has changed, something has ended, and whatever is to come has not yet emerged. It comes from the word limen, a Latin word for doorstep. It's talking about this space between one time and the next. And over the past 5 years, we've had several liminal seasons here at the community church. I came in February of 2020, and we immediately had our COVID lockdown in our online community. Our in-person, our sanctuary worship had ended, and we were living in a very different way. From there, we developed a hybrid community such as we have today. So we have members who can worship remotely with us, friends who join us from distance to be with us on Sunday mornings, as well as participate in other aspects of our church life together, because we have many activities now online. We have our Bible study takes place on Zoom, and our Friday discussion group also. There was a time about 1.5 years ago when we welcomed 8 new members. It was a time when a group of people who didn't know each other before came to the church and recognized that this was a place for them to call home. And I also might call our recent sabbatical, my sabbatical of 3 months and a sabbatical of sorts among the congregation, a liminal season as well. So in a way, my 5 years here have been one long liminal season. And now it's time to really engage what it means to be in this kind of a season, to recognize what has ended, what has fallen apart, even what might have broken, and to respond. And that not to respond with vigorous decision-making or structured plans and strategies, no. To deliberately explore and experiment. The question is, here in the community church's 100th year, how will we respond? In her book about liminal seasons, the book called How to Lead When You Don't Know Where You're Going, Susan Beaumont reminds us that we don't have to rush to change anything or to keep anything from changing. But she has some suggestions about things we might attend to. And the first one is to remember that these liminal seasons are times of disorientation and even dysfunction. What worked before doesn't necessarily work now. And to pay attention without judgment. Pay attention without judgment to whatever is happening. And at the same time, not to forget that these liminal seasons are also times to welcome creativity and imagination. Beaumont holds up for us a word, authenticity. She says, whatever we experiment with, wherever we go, we must be true to ourselves, true to our community, true to our church. This isn't a time to try to be people we are not, or to reject or forget what brought us here. It's a time to draw on the spirit of this place, the 100 years of spirit that rests here. Even as I at least walk in the door, I know people have been worshiping here. Well, in this building for 95 years, but together for 100. So we want to draw on that spirit, both in a broad religious sense, our understanding of our tradition, but also the local sense. What kind of little church are we? We move forward from a place of wonder. We wonder. We suspend our expectations about what ought to happen. And we get to ask, who am I? Who am I now? Who are we? What is being called forth from this little band of pilgrims? And how then shall we move ahead? And as Paul would remind us, what spiritual and other gifts do we bring? What gifts emerge? As we meet to share what we see and hear and perceive, we help each other sustain an openness to wonder, a willingness to be vulnerable together, to experiment, to take risks, to learn from mistakes. We even become willing to face failure. To learn to view our situation as an emerging future, rather than from our limiting past. We cultivate an open mind that would contrast a voice of judgment. An open heart, not a voice of cynicism or despair. An open will, not a voice of fear. We cultivate the capacity to let go of preconceived outcomes and let come what wants to emerge from the future. We seek to be aware of internal voices that limit us, and we practice adopting a stance of wonder, a more wholehearted, open stance. We practice releasing desire for control, even practice yielding to whatever does come. We seek to choose our courses of action with open mind, open heart, open will, so that our thinking becomes more generative, more hope-filled, and more loving. There are 3 spiritual shifts that we might experience, that we might welcome if we experience them, that we might open ourselves to experience. And the first one is, in Beaumont's words, from knowing to unknowing. Now, unknowing isn't the same as ignorance. It's not that we deny what we know, but it's that we offer our knowledge without holding tightly to what is known. And we trust that collective wisdom will emerge if given an opening. Now, this unknowing is, of course, we never fully arrive there, but we again and again adopt our stance of wonder, seeking to perceive things with fresh perception. Another spiritual shift we might experience is from advocating to attending. Again, Beaumont's words. She says, how we pay attention, what we focus on, determines how decision-making unfolds. Now, this liminal seasons in general, they are disruptions. They can be profound disruptions. There's no clear picture where we are, where we're going. And adopting this attending stance means we practice embracing the present moment, wondering what it will teach me. You know, sometimes when failure breaks us open, we become more ready to learn. And her third one, this is, I think, perhaps a most difficult one for we North Americans of the 21st century. A spiritual shift from striving to surrender. Now, our striving selves love to power through barriers. We love to get things resolved. We push aside what we don't know and barrel ahead. But this mode of surrender that Beaumont is talking about, it comes from our contemplative tradition. And it means seeking to expand our field of perception, accepting the past for what it was. We can't change it anyway. Yes, that happened, that was there. Embracing what's going on in the present, seeing each other clearly, hearing what's coming out of us, what's emerging into our community. And yielding to that mystery we call God, and throw a blanket over it so we can name it. That mystery, because it's that mystery that draws us into the future. It's not easy accepting experience that we didn't want, that we would never have chosen. Some of us are getting older, and we experience things in our bodies that we would never have chosen, but there they are. here in our community, a number among us have died in recent years. I was thinking particularly this week of Jack Bartlett, who was perhaps our member who had a great gift for prophecy. He was always calling us to justice. But we accept our experience so that we can learn what we need to learn from it, so that we can become the people we need to become, so that we are able to embrace the future. I needn't say, but I will, that none of us masters these practices. It's an aspiration, but we can remember them, we can remind ourselves when we get caught up in advocating firmly for one point of view. Just a little telling on myself here. Our printer in the office is needing to be replaced. And there has been quite a bit of discussion about, well, what functions do we actually need at this time? I am quite clear that we need to have the same functions. It doesn't have to be the same kind of equipment, but we need to have those functions. Some say, could we meet those functions by other means? I have to surrender and say, I have to listen. Yeah. So we keep putting one foot in front of the other. Or one key on the keyboard after the next. Or one meeting after another. It's a journey. We engage the journey as it emerges. Sometimes we might have ideas about where to go next. We contemplate those together. We consider them. We say, yes, let's try that. Holding it lightly, knowing that we cannot force a future in any way. Just as we cannot force a gift to emerge from ourselves or practice a skill that we've not learned. So in the end, we might say that this experience, this liminal experience, this opportunity to share these kinds of time together, to cultivate our community for this moment, for this time, for the future as we can perceive it. This is all a gift. It is all a gift from that great mystery. Our hope is that we're self-aware enough to step aside and receive the gift when it's given. Sometimes we need a little reassurance. And I do like to call on something that the mystic Julian of Norwich said centuries ago. She said, "All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of thing shall be well." So we've had our invitation to join meetings after worship. We've had an invitation to transformation because we all know that these liminal seasons happen in many parts of our lives. And these practices that Beaumont has been teaching us, these practices can be important for us in many settings. So we have this great invitation to engage the liminal seasons of our lives. Because engaging these liminal seasons, that is to open ourselves, Yes, to open ourselves to the hope and the possibility of transformation. Amen.